Rangers Journal now. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's special edition of the Rangers Journal. Tonight I have Ryan Williams from the Blue Frontier podcast. Who's going to do a bit of a deep dive with Kevin Thelwell and Dan Purdy at the heart of the conversation. Ryan, it's good to see you again. Thanks for coming back. If you didn't know already, Ryan was on the show earlier in the summer with a Brown Brogues podcast that we did on Sean Dyche potentially being the manager. And this was early days. And then literally as we wrapped up recording, news broke that David Ancelotti was going to be the main man. So it's law. But Ryan, how's things?
Hey, good to be here, guys. Thanks for having me back.
No, thanks for joining us. Finally, I've got two other bloggers with me here. I've got the most optimistic man about the 49ers takeover and the Rangers Journal, which is Stevie. How you doing, Stevie?
Good evening, mate. I'm good. How are you?
And I've got the face of the Rangers Journal shorts, Dino. How are you, Dino?
I'm good, thank you, mate. How are you getting on?
Aye, grand. Can't complain. Looking forward to this.
Aye.
So we'll go straight into it then. The main man, obviously, Ryan, is Kevin Thelwell. So I'll just give the viewers just a quick overview, basically, his CV. So he started off at Derby and Preston, working in youth academies. Then in 2008, he became academy manager at Wolves, and then later on becoming sporting director. And then he made a move across the Wild Atlantic in 2020 to become head of sport for New York Red Bulls.
Yep.
And then eventually came back to Everton for three years, and he's now at Rangers. Ryan, what was your first impressions of Kevin when you came into Everton?
Well, I'd already known him a little bit just from my experience here in North America. He actually did a very good job with Red Bulls. They were kind of stuck in kind of a rut. They weren't acting like a very Red Bull type team. So he changed their recruitment style to be a little bit more in line with what I think you'd expect, what you see in Salzburg and Leipzig. A little surprised he got hired, I mean, I think some people are slightly underwhelmed just because he wasn't necessarily a big name. And, Wolves, it was hard to tell what he really did, considering they were so fueled into the Gestafood Jorge Mendes recruitment model. I mean, there's not much left there. It was all agent dealings. But he settled in pretty quickly in Everton. I don't know if he knew exactly what he was going to get himself into. I think you guys have heard the bits, but tough gig at Everton. Really, you ran into something that was probably in a lot worse shape than he thought. And if Stevie is the most optimistic Rangers fan, you may accuse me of saying the same thing about Thelwell and Purdy together. I think they did a fantastic job, to be perfectly honest. You will hear a mixed bag from fans and other people, but I think the people that really do follow and understand football and recruitment and understood how difficult it was there, I think they'll believe he did a very good job, and he carried himself very well. As it's just a tough time, tough ownership, tough group. But yeah, I mean, look, Everton were really never close to relegation when he had influence. The first year is when he came in and when they did dodge a bullet, but afterwards, even with the points deductions, they put together a team that was capable of staying up, and they did that. So I think history will be very fond on Kevin Thelwell. And obviously Purdy, they didn't expect to leave. Dan just left. That was a big surprise for them. They're only now filling his role. He was all slated to be on the transfer committee and just decided it wasn't for him.
That then leads me on, and obviously as you bring on to Dan Purdy. So he's been at Everton since 2013. Started off as recruitment and data analysis, then became head of recruitment in 2021. The question was going to be, is there any coincidence then that Thelwell's come out at Rangers and he's brought Dan with him?
Yeah, I think Dan was slated to go maybe some other places as well. I don't think that was a shoo-in for sure. I think Dan did have a good relationship with Kevin. I think most people do. I think Kevin has a good reputation in general about being someone that's easy to work with. But I think Dan was very close to Marcel Brands, who's running PSV at this point, literally as president, I believe. So I think, Dan's worked with a lot of people. He has a lot of connections. I think they're a lot. Rangers, I think, did very well to get him. But what I understand, I mean, they were very welcoming as a club, very accommodating. I don't know. I think if you ask Dan right before when he decided to leave Everton, he probably would not have predicted he would have been at Rangers, even though I think a lot of people thought it was a very obvious link. And I think Rangers have done very, very well to get him. I really think, from my experience, that you're not going to find anyone better. I really mean that. I mean, the guy knows every player. He's very understated. Like, you'll never see him on camera. He'll do his best to avoid it. But he's very well organized, very to the point. I think he had a very good feel for the Premier League. I think that's your only risk, someone stepping in where it's a different league. A lot of pressure at Rangers, obvious. I mean, there's no, you win or you're out. And I think there are a lot of different ways and areas you can recruit from. It's very different recruiting from a Premier League club than it is recruiting for, some of my experience too. And where I recruit North America, you can source from a lot of different leagues, and that can be challenging sometimes.
Yeah. Going then on their obviously digging into their history, post Everton, Wales have been in our Premier League club, but they also had worked in the Championship as well, helped get promotion. Thelwell did with Wales. The modern scouting system, the modern recruitment system is data, statistic analysis, spreadsheets. That's just the way it's going, and I say the obvious club that does that and does it quite well and successfully would be Brighton, because they're just churning out player after player after player. Do you think we're going to see that approach with Dan and Kevin at Rangers, or did they work differently at Everton? Was there a different approach to it?
I think what you'll hear Kevin talk a lot about is sporting identity, football identity, and really he does talk like a modern sporting director. The whole cycle will be what you think it would be. I think you'll see data the way you see it with most clubs, most modern clubs, really more upfront in terms of the identification, because no one can afford to have scouts everywhere anymore. And I can sit there and queue up right now on my laptop and watch any player I want just like that. Yeah. I think you'll see a lot of that. And then I think on the due diligence side, on the back end, they'll ask questions. They'll know what the data says, I guess. Ideally, the way it will work out is if you're strong with your sporting identity, you have an idea of how you want to play, you have the player models to do it. That's how you can really identify talent. I do think they'll look in a lot of different places, though. I think Rangers has a fantastic reputation, a strong name. It's an attractive place to play, I think, in my opinion. So I would not be surprised if they source from a lot of different places, but it's hard to say. How long will it take for them to really put everything in place right away? And you guys need a lot of players. You know what I mean? There's been a lot of people out. There could be more. I don't know. There's lots of rumors, of course. So I don't know how much of it will be fully in place, but the good part is that you're inheriting a guy. Dan knows everyone, every player, you name it, every league. He's about as up to date as he possibly could be. So there's some benefit there. It's not like he's coming from Man City. You know what I mean? Where, Everton had to be crafty, had to be resourceful. They had to look in different places and be clever about how they went and sourced players. So it's not that far off. You know what I mean?
Ryan, Scotty, our main guy here at the Rangers Journal is asking, can you see any players coming from Everton to Rangers now?
Well, first of all, Everton don't have many players, so they're in the same boat. I have no doubt that they're going to try and find a place for Nathan Patterson. It depends on what happens with, I think you guys have very good wingbacks, honestly, on both sides. So, but Patterson has the physical attributes that I think would be a good match. His issues are more defensive, some of his decision-making, but you got a guy with his size, pace, his skill. And if you look at the metrics too, he's actually very effective as he got forward. But Everton weren't going to get forward under Dyche. He was a terrible fit for what Sean Dyche wanted to do. Moyes a little bit more flexible, but still, he had just got there. So tough to say. I see him. I can't imagine you guys are going to need like another center forward option, but I will say this, Yusuf Chermiti there is a young kid from Portugal. You could do a lot worse by getting him on loan. He's going to need to play somewhere. He's had a lot of different injuries. Otherwise, no, not many options, only just because it's been thin. Harrison Armstrong was a very good central midfielder that was on loan to Derby last year, who did very well in the championship. He's not sure he has a perfect position yet. He played deeper there in the midfield, but He's wonderful on the ball, super skilled, big ceiling for him. Those might be options, I would say, but a lot of the academy guys that would be able to make that step up are gone. I mean, they had to sell them literally to stay afloat. So as a shame as that is, I think it's probably unlikely there are too many options, I think, for Rangers, at least coming from Everton.
I suppose that's part and parcel on the big, shiny, brand new stadium, isn't it?
Well, there's a little bit of that, but I mean, they got to convince people to believe in the project too. I mean, honestly, Dan would probably tell you these stories too whenever he finally gets to talk. I mean, how difficult it was to sell a very difficult situation at Everton. And I thought they did very well getting some guys in the door that, I mean, a guy like Amadou Onana is not going to come and go play for everything. One thing you'll find out, both those guys are very good at kind of putting those finishing touches on players and building relationships. And one big change is, as Farhad Mashiri kind of took a step back, you'll see a lot of the players that Everton brought in weren't from big name agent guys, family representation, smaller guys that they built relationships with over time. I think that's interesting. And certainly they've saved a lot on agent fees. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how quickly they can get up and running and kind of blend in and fit in with the existing scouting department that's there. Because like I said before, I mean, Rangers need players.
Yeah. Dino, do you have a question for Ryan?
I certainly do, Ryan. Just for the context and peace of mind for our Rangers fans here, everywhere. Anything that you could put your finger on as to why we've not signed anybody yet?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, sometimes it takes time to get things up and running. Your suggestion is Rangers should have maybe brought someone in the door already. The other thing that's weird is this year is the way the windows are set up. They kind of had the early window opening for the World Club Championship. I don't know if you guys have been watching any of that, but I was just watching Messi play, which is so odd to say at Miami. I think a lot of people have been surprised. There hasn't been as much movement as I would have expected. I would have thought a lot of these clubs really wanted to lock down some deals to bring guys in. And sometimes I guess, the chips at the top have to fall a little bit maybe for things to get in motion. I don't know. Kind of curious your guys' take on that too. I mean, from your perspective, I think you probably would have assumed you'd have seen some guys in the door already, no?
Well, yeah, given that, several teams in the SPFL have signed multiple players already and are just seem to be adding every other day, and we aren't. And we've got the pre-season starting on Monday. Champions League qualifiers just round the corner. Is a lot for Russell Martin to take care of very, very early, and we're needing fresh bodies in ASAP and to start building this spine. It just seems that things are just taking a little while longer, and I thought maybe you would be able to maybe have a sort of more definitive answer to put Rangers fans at ease, if that makes sense.
Well, it's hard, though, to really kind of extrapolate the experience at Everton and compare it when you had a team that was cash-strapped. Not just tough from a PSR standpoint, but the second the Russian kind of Ukraine conflict happened, all of Farhad Mashiri's cash was tied up. Suddenly he didn't have the ability to, front the cash for transactions. I mean, this Everton team has the lowest net spend in the Premier League over the last 3 years, really the last 5 years, but under Thelwell, the last 3 years by 50 million euros. They're one of only two teams with a positive. There was a window where when they brought in Beto and Shermidi and a couple other guys where they literally spent zero cash on any permanent transfers. They spent 3 million. That's it. The entire window and the entire year on an upfront loan fee for a Premier League club. So I would guess that it is going to take them a little bit time to ramp up. I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but yeah, I'm kind of with you. I mean, God, if they don't at least bring in some guys, I would be a little bit nervous. That first matchup too that you guys have, that's no pushover for sure.
No, most certainly not. No, and I think it's obviously every day comes in and there's no announcements made. It just makes the fans even be a little bit more anxious day by day, and it just building, and it's synonymous throughout the support. So it's just it's not just one person thinking it, it's everybody, which I think makes it even more emphasised.
Yeah, and honestly, Everton's in the same boat too. I mean, I think Dan Purdy leaving the recruitment committee, I think, was a real shocker to them. And I think only recently have they brought in some new guys. I think Everton done well getting guys in that are qualified, but I mean, I don't know what that setup's even going to look like. There's no sporting director. Everton are completely changing their scheme. I mean, it's not like a one-for-one replacement. So I mean, I'm worried as well for our club. But yeah, I mean, I understand you guys are nervous, but I will say this. I mean, at least you're plugging in guys that have relationships all across the world too. I mean, there's no stretch here. These guys are very comfortable in their roles. They should be able to settle in pretty quickly. I think if there's one positive, like they've done this before, this is nothing new. Both these guys are very qualified for what they're doing and should be able to settle in pretty quickly. I hope, at least for you guys.
Stevie, do you have a question for Ryan?
I do, yeah. Thanks, Ryan. That was like a really insightful information you gave us there. Purdy obviously stayed at Everton for like over 10 years, Thelwell 3 or 4 years. They've obviously got a really good like existing relationship. Do you see them being at Rangers longer term? Obviously, I know it depends on the success or the luck, whatever happens. But do you think their aim is to be there for 2, 3, 4 years?
I think it could happen. I mean, I don't think Kevin's thought of, for fair or not fair, as you name it, like super high level necessarily sporting director that's necessarily on the move. But I mean, it's not like he's from some far distant foreign land. I will say this too, Dan. I mean, Dan has a young family too. I think he treasured the stability that he had being in Liverpool for as long as he was. Certainly he had opportunities to jump ship as well. So, yeah, I think there's, I will say this too. I mean, just knowing a little bit about the situation, I think it was very difficult for both those guys to not really get a chance to build. They kept Everton on life support. They did a very good job shedding salaries. I talked about the difficulties in it. I think they both would have really liked a proper opportunity to rebuild the club. And I think it says and speaks volumes that Purdy left saying he didn't feel like he could. That's hard. Like if you really put yourself in that situation, I mean, you've had to struggle, you've dealt with an impossible circumstance, and now bang, new owners, massive opportunity to really right the ship and stand Everton up the table. So that's got to be disappointing. I understand your concern, Stevie, because you've looked at Kevin's resume and you've seen him move around a lot. I mean, anyone that's willing to go to America and try something, I mean, there's something to be said for that. But I see there's no reason I would think, obviously, why they would want to jump from Rangers. And look, I know you guys are so close to the club. It is what it is. But I think most sane people, at least that have a grasp on world football, appreciate Rangers, appreciate it for being a great club and still having a worldwide brand. So there aren't that many step ups, in my opinion, from that. You're going to be competing in Europe all the time. The league is still known. I could still turn on my telly and watch it anytime I want, which is kind of cool. So, I really don't think there's that many situations. And I'll say this, you tell me if I'm wrong. If you win at Rangers and you knock off Celtic and you take over again, I mean, how loved are you? Is there any club that shows winners more love?
Awesome.
You know what I mean? Like I would want to be there too, man. Bring me on staff. We win. I'll march around Ibrox all day and buy beers for everyone. We'll have a party. It'll be great. And I'm rooting for you too, honestly.
Ryan, Paul's asking a question here about Thelwell and Purdy dealing with fans. It's something I was going to talk about later on, but we'll jump to that now. Dan's role is probably not going to be as sort of front-facing with fans as much as obviously Kevin's role will. And I thought Kevin came across really well whenever he was introducing Martin to the press and to the fans whenever he was announced. Is there much fan engagement between either of them? Or does they like to sort of sit in the background and just let the recruitment talk on the pitch, essentially?
I mean, Dan's a soft-spoken guy. He'll kind of sit in the background, I think, a little bit. Kevin obviously has to be front and foremost. I mean, you can't do that at a club like Rangers. I mean, you guys are not going to tolerate that. I mean, come on. I will say this. I think it was very disappointing at Everton. Not his fault necessarily that, it's the people's club. And you would expect more transparency. I think if there was a number one criticism of the Bill Kenwright era, it's the lack of transparency at the top from leadership. And I would say it's a disappointment that Kevin didn't get a chance to do more of that. I wouldn't characterize Kevin Thelwell. And again, I don't know Kevin, but my impression of him is that he's just a pro. You know what I mean? He's not going to be overly elaborate when he's spoken. He has written a book, by the way, if you've read his tactical book on the 3-5-2, I think it is. I'm not kidding. I'm not making this up. When he was in Wales FA, he was like a pretty technical guy. And so he does know football, which is kind of nice. Yeah, I mean, I think he'll carry himself very well. He'll be very professional. Obviously the guy's been in a lot of different environments. So that's a feather in his cap. But I mean, you're not going to get this kind of overly personal, crazy personality or anything. I think he's going to be respectful of the club, respectful of the fans. And I don't think he would shy away from opportunities to get in there and talk and interact with people necessarily. Yeah. But, I think it'd be a fair criticism that we didn't hear from him that much at Everton, but I think it's more of a criticism of the state of the club than Kevin himself.
Jumping in back to the type of players that were signed under Kevin and Dan's tenure, was recruitment focused on the league itself, as in the style, the league, the physicality of the league, the pace of the league, the technical side of the league, or were the players recruited for the then manager's playing style?
Yeah, that's a tough one because Thelwell never had the opportunity to bring in the manager himself. So that was a challenge. So you did see a little bit different recruitment with Frank Lampard. Frank was very good at selling and closing players and getting them to Everton. Sean Dyche is not that way at all. I think if you looked at Sean, I think, Jock, when I was on last time, we were joking around about Dyche, that I don't think Dyche had ever had a South or North American player his entire career. I think the first one he had is coming up to Everton, and like Yerry Mina was there. Like, he never had one. So that's a tough sell. The style of football is pretty negative under him, and there's some limitations. I think also something that's worth noting when you go back and look at some of the players, some of them were viewed as not successful initially, partially because there was conflict with the manager. This past year, Sean Dyche had no business getting fired. I mean, he had a team that was more than capable of being, lower mid-table and being safe. And he just kind of, I don't know if he just lost his mind or just, he got very stubborn about the usage of players. Like a guy like Jake O'Brien, who 6'6", incredible feet, wonderful talent, never played. He refused to play Beto for some reason. I don't know why. And maybe because it wasn't his choice, and that was a Thelwell Purdy thing. And again, a guy they bought for big number, but no money up front, like literally none. They couldn't spend any money. So this is kind of the crazy things that they had to do. I do know this. I mean, Dan loves a physical profile. He'll be the first one to probably tell you that. And I think the one thing that they will do is they will be very cognizant of what they think plays in the league. That matters. These guys are not dummies. They understand that. I know for sure there would have been players where, I may have thought have been good players themselves, but I knew maybe weren't a fit for the Premier League and some of the physical aspects of it. They would never have taken them at Everton because of that reason. So they'll be very cognizant of what they think wins in the league and what they don't. Again, neither of them have been working within the league for years and years, so maybe that's a risk. But yeah, they'll absolutely be focused their profile on what they think will work. And I think Kevin will make sure that identity is driven all the way straight down through recruitment. But I would be surprised if you didn't see some pretty good physical profiles coming to Rangers, if I had to guess. If I had to err on the technical versus the physical, I'll bet you'll see physical. Because I actually think the SPL probably does favor a good physical profile. And I think Rangers has access to some physical talents that maybe some of the other clubs don't. That's just my guess, if I had to guess.
Dale, your question?
Aye, so obviously the SPFL does require a certain type of player physically and mentally, especially when you're playing at Rangers. And like you've kind of alluded to earlier on, the quality player that obviously you can sign at Everton is not different to what you can sign at Rangers, but take that aspect of it away. Are you confident that within the space of 2-3 windows that they will have a squad physically and mentally capable of performing and being successful with Rangers?
Well, obviously they do know and had experience with the ownership group. And it does sound like obviously the money's got to be there first, right? And it does sound like it will be. It sounds like those guys are serious. They want to back it. Yeah, I think the challenge is going to be, is it going to be in the first window or not? I mean, you guys have needs. There's no doubt. That's hard though. And the one thing that they deserve a lot of credit for is, and I don't know how that translates into the situation now, is at Everton, because they had to sell over time, probably the best thing that those guys do is a tandem. And maybe some of this is the carryover from Marcel Brands and him working with Dan, is building longer term relationships. Like for example, they got Ilman Ndiaye from Marseille. Now he had left Sheffield to go to Marseille, and things didn't go well at Marseille, but he grew up there. He was an OM guy. So as a kid, so to him, it was a very special move. The fact that they tracked him for 2 years at least kept the relationship going and eventually convinced him. I think that's more of a typical of where you might see that you'd sneak in a player or two that you might be like, oh, wow, all right, good for us to try to get that player in, because they're good at building the longer term relationships. I think that's a risk then in the immediate window, of course. What I don't know is, and obviously Kevin has experience dealing with top agents, and the Moshiri reign was basically top agents, sadly, in many ways. So it's not like Dan hasn't interacted with them, but maybe that's a risk, because you want to bring in top players immediately or top players at all. Sometimes the best way to do that without building longer term relationships is go through the big name agents. I'm sure you guys have seen countless examples where this guy came to Club A and you're thinking, wow, that is a big profile player going to Club A. And you realize, oh, well, that's because Jorge Mendez took him there, or, you name it. It could be any one of the super agents. So you would think, though, the good part is they have a mixed background. Both these guys have dealt with different types of people in different situations. So there's nothing to say it couldn't happen. But yeah, I would understand some concern about that too. And I think that's real.
Ryan, I'm conscious of time. How are you doing? Are you okay? You still on for half hour? Yeah.
I can go a couple more.
Okay. I think what you were talking about earlier there is us as fans right now, we're itching at the bit to sign players because this was all happened and it's all brand new and exciting. But as you're talking about, it takes time to build relationships. And this recruitment team we have is just in the door. So it's going to take time to build those relationships. With that, Stevie, anything you want to add or ask, Ryan?
Ryan, you could sell Snotty Eskimos. Honestly, I'm absolutely sold on this partnership. Seriously, guys like Jerry Maguire.
I think they're very good, though, Stevie. Trust me.
Yeah.
If guys I didn't have a lot of respect for, you would hear a very different story. And I do have some experience with these guys too, and I've always been very impressed with them. So
the way you're speaking, they seem so comprehensive, like so thorough.
Yeah.
That's what's coming across to me, which is fantastic. So, yeah, it's really good stuff. One quick question. Has there been any player at either Club Wolves or Everton who's been like a problem player and they've had to deal with? I was going to wonder about that, if that's came up at all.
Well, I will say this. The prior regime, if there was a good criticism of the Purdy time at with Marcel Brands, is they brought in some talents that I feel like maybe the character wasn't there. Because a couple guys didn't develop and you're like, or they were just immature. I mean, Moise Kean is killing it at Fiorentina. Yeah. He was a 19-year-old kid, but maybe, and granted, that was Carlo Ancelotti, right? I mean, if he can't manage someone, maybe that's not the issue. I didn't see that with Thelwell. I think most of the guys they brought in were of high character, and I think that was valued. Probably Kevin, if you probably ask Kevin, I would say that that's a big deal for him. Doing the due diligence to really understand. In fact, I feel like in every one of the case when they brought a player in, they hadn't just met and experienced and spent time in person with the agents. They had spent time in person and already knew the players well. That's not always the case. A lot of that kind of due diligence is done via proxy, if you know what I mean. The way modern recruitment's done a lot of times, there's a reliance on this person's opinion, or it's the direct scout, that goes in and meets with them after the game or not. What? I mean, Dan made a lot of those trips himself. Now, granted, because the staff was small and they didn't have the money, but I mean, you're not going to see Dan in town all that often. Let's put it that way. He'll be out there talking and meeting with guys. I don't know how active Kevin will be in that regard, but I know Dan probably will be. I don't know if that's a perfect answer for your question. I will say the one thing I will also add too is the one good part is, maybe the Premier League has a little bit more of an attraction from a money standpoint, but I feel like still younger players that have the physical profile already, because that's one of the challenges of the younger player. I think playing in Scotland, like you could be a young talent, but if you're not willing or can't handle an elbow in the chest every now and then, you're not going to do very well. You've got to be a fighter, especially in front of that crowd, the way I would imagine it is, having never physically been into the building, have been to Glasgow, not been to Ibrox. That was a dumb mistake by me, but that's another story. I mean, I think the one nice part is having your tentacles in kind of the young players all over the place. There is some correlation there too. There may have been some guys that they saw that, I know for a fact, guys that they saw that they thought were all right, but maybe not quite for the right situation, that is going to be right on their list right away. So I'm optimistic that they'll at least come in with some ideas. Hopefully it'll play out kind of like Dan coming in and saying, all right, guys, here's within the type of player we want. Here are the guys that I know of that from my previous experience that I would take a look at. Hey, scouting team, who do you guys have lined up too? maybe you'll find some matches early and get a little bit lucky and run out and go grab these guys. I don't know. Otherwise, I think it's going to take a little bit of time. I just know you don't want to hear that. So,
Ryan, traditionally, Everton, did they buy players in at the start of the window? See the summer window, for example, were they recruiting early for the start of pre-season? Because Rangers will obviously almost every season have European football, and the way the coefficient is, there's no guarantees we're straight into competition now. We have to go through qualifying rounds, so we're going to be starting quite sort of mid-July now, and I think this is where a lot of anxiety is sitting with the Rangers fans at the moment. Is we're now 4 weeks away from that. We've only got one player in, so I think we're starting, because obviously it's our first window with these guys, we want to kind of know, are they fast movers, or is it the right player comes available at the right time, they jump?
Mixed. I mean, I think it's hard to take much from Everton too, Jock, because, they were so tight on cash. They just couldn't really make those types of moves. You saw some moves late when they felt like, all right, we had a little budget left. Let's bring in a loan or two. So I don't know, man. I just feel like it's not, I don't think there's a good scenario to really extrapolate to say that they'll be one way or the other. Surely they've got to be aware of the sense of urgency though, right? I mean, they have to.
Yeah, you'd like to think so. I think that's the thing. It's just, we're just itching, and the window's been open now since Tuesday. And as you alluded to earlier, I think that early window for those club teams is kind of throwing people off a wee bit, because it's not a World Cup or a European Championship window where things tend to move later on. And like
I think one thing that's tough too is it's not like, some of these guys get hired and they've known for weeks, you know what I mean? And they're just lined up and they're waiting for their official start date. That was not the case here. I mean, like, Dan got pulled in pretty late in the process. So, if that's your main recruitment guy, I mean, in fact, I feel like when he showed up, like, some of the people had only found out that weekend, you know what I mean? So that's a pretty quick turnaround. So, not that they need any more pressure, but that's got to be tough. It's a tough situation either way, but surely they'll be cognizant of it.
Dino, your question?
Just because I'm just conscious of the time. You've just kind of echo what Stevie said. You've spoke so well.
Thank you.
Would love to have you back on at a later point as well. But one thing I want to know is, you see with you mentioned Kevin Thelwell and his 3-5-2 book and play football and things like that. Something that I had suggested on the pod was that Kevin Thelwell was maybe perhaps going to have more of a say in terms of formation, ethos and things like that. And obviously Russell Martin has played three different formations at his three respective clubs. Do you think Kevin Thelwell, with his knowledge of what you've suggested, is that he will have more of a say in how we actually do play football?
It's a good question. I don't know, and I'll tell you why, because he didn't have that influence at Everton. I mean, I could tell you for a fact, especially when they brought in O'Brien and when Everton were struggling in the first half of this year under Dyche. Dyche at one point flipped to play a 3-4-3, and it worked incredibly well. They went and just destroyed Villa, who were certainly a better team than Everton in the year prior, even though I don't even think their personnel were conducive to it. Everton's personnel were screaming to play 3-4-3 with Jake playing on the right side. He wouldn't do it. And I think they were urging him to do it. So I don't know. There are always rumors that, Kevin really wanted a back three. I don't think he really cares, man. Honestly, I don't think so. I think most modern sporting directors recognize that, look, the formation, the system, the tactics, style of play is one thing. You hire a manager in theory to reflect the style of play that you want your club to play, but you got to give them the lineup card. You've got to give them the tactics. Like you can't do that to them. And I would imagine that Kevin knows that. He's certainly not a meddlesome guy. I guess I'd say that. Some of these sporting directors come in with very distinct ideas and they're very domineering. And, a guy like Vic Orta, who had a lot of experience at Leeds, who I did some work with in the past, is a great guy, lovely guy, but he was very active and very present and very known. And I think was a strong body. I think Kevin is a little bit more kind of relaxed, structured than that, if that tells you. So I think Russell will have the chance to do what he wants to do tactically. I don't think they're going to meddle with him too much in that regard, if I had to guess. So despite his maybe love of the 3-5-2, I think that's what the book was about, if I recall. I don't think that'll be a factor, really. What do you guys think about Russell Martin, by the way? I'm very interested what you guys think. A couple of us have been thinking about it. One of the guys on our pod, the Blue Frontier, Sean, is like, that's an interesting hire. I don't know how I feel about it, so I'm kind of curious what you guys think about. David Ancelotti would have been strange. It's hard to say. A lot of people loved him from his time at Everton. Sean Dyche is not a good fit. I think we talked about Jock, but curious what you guys think. And then I'll have to find my merry way out of here, or else my kid's going to kill me to get him to soccer. So,
Stevie, you can take this one.
So Ryan, there was like a nuclear meltdown in their WhatsApp chat when they got announced. I'm not exaggerating; it was hilarious. But what I would say is, I was quite maybe in his camp. I thought it was a decent appointment. But a lot of the guys, after they heard him interview, a couple of days later, they all started to warm to him. So yeah, I think it was definitely wasn't popular at first, but I think people are definitely coming around to him.
You're right. It could have been worse. He seems like a lovely guy for sure. And maybe the way he wants to play he's not the guy that you want to have a lower end team jump into the Premier League. Maybe he is a better player with the team that I know the mandate is they got to keep the ball. They got to score goals. You know what I mean? Like there is a certain style of play. I know for a fact there is a distinct style of play that the ownership demands and certain standards that they demand on the football side already. I know that's been very made clear to those guys. So, and I think it's what you think it would be. So that's something to factor in. So they were cognizant of it, whatever influence, whether it was Kevin's decision alone, whatever influence they had in picking the manager, they knew darn well what type of play that they need to have. So is this the guy to bring it? I don't know. I was pretty impressed with his initial kind of interviews and discussions too. So I certainly hope it works out for him. He seems like a lovely guy.
Yeah, I was the same. I was kind of a bit deflated, a bit disappointed, but then when you hear him speak, he comes across really well, and we're all going to have to sort of get behind him because this is a position we're in. We've got no much choice, have we? I think, again, it's an anxiety for everybody because he has this style of football, this brand of football that gives us the fear because it involves the goalkeeper playing out the back with both feet, and our goalkeeper can't really do that. Our goalkeeper struggles to catch the ball sometimes. He even punches it into his own net when he feels like it. So, I mean...
Well, I'll tell you what, João Virginia is on a free from Everton. That's not a bad fit then. Just throwing it out there. That's a guy. Very good with his feet. Solid player. Yeah, not bad.
Well, Ryan, we'll let you go. Thanks for giving us your time and get your kid to soccer for us.
Right, exactly. I say football now, so it's just kind of funny. But when my kid's playing over here in America, I say football. You know what they think? Snob. Yeah, absolutely. So what can I do? Thanks a lot for the opportunity, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again, Ryan. Cheers for coming on.
Bye.
Good seeing you guys.
Nice to meet you, Ryan. Cheers. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Well, there you go. That's Ryan. Top man, as you see, he's plenty of energy, and he's very enthusiastic about both guys that have come into Rangers. So, do you feel any better, Stevie? You any happier or
Yeah. I was pretty happy before, mate, but no, he really kind of went through it really well. And I think even the point he made there at the end about how the leadership want to play a certain way, that's really strong. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They've got a clear vision. And if that's coming down for the top, that can only be a good thing. So now I think he made a lot of really interesting points there. Went into quite a bit of detail about how these guys, when they go for a player, they really find out his character, do their due diligence. So yeah, I mean, I don't think any Rangers fan who's watched that tonight and they've not been impressed, I'd be amazed because that came across really well.
Aye.
Dino, what are your thoughts?
It was just what I really liked hearing was that he said that they get to know the player. It just reminds me back to how players used to be signed.
Yeah.
Do managers and people would get to know the player and stuff like that. And I think that's I think that could prove quite pivotal for us, to be quite honest with you. A completely different approach and how we sign players and how we get to make relationships with players and agents and things like that. And, hearing us going to be this 21st century football club is just incredibly refreshing. And and appealing as a fan, because we've been subjected to, excuse my language, to just shite for far too long. And it's like I physically and mentally can't take it anymore. So I'm just at the stage now. It's the guy just made me feel even better that my giddy optimism is warranted.
I do think, as I say, we just need to accept that this is early stages, and these guys are, quite early in the door, so they are going to take time to get things right. And Rangers at the moment, whether you like it or not, it's going to be a hard sell because of the way things have went the past couple of years, and like European football thing. I think that's their only sort of plus side at the moment, because the manager's coming in with a sort of not the best track record at the moment. The previous appointments not went well, so maybe we might find that players might knock us back because of that. Who knows?
Regarding the signings, though, guys, we know missing the fact that there's a general meeting on Monday, 23rd. There's like a board meeting on Monday that has to approve the shareholder thinks the 20 million. So is that maybe once that's the signings will come?
Heart in hand, I think David Edgar tweeted heart in hand saying that that's not
It's not happening.
Nah, that's not relevant with us not signing any players. So
we'll see. I don't know. I just expect signings next week. I think pre-season is going to start on Monday, and then guys are going to start coming in the door. I'm not too worried about it right this second. If it gets to the end of next week and we're still in the same position, then I'll start to worry a wee bit. But right now, I'm still quite relaxed.
Gordon, I'm not saying we don't have pulling power. I just think our pulling power is just maybe not quite as what it used to be at the moment. You would imagine, because we have this new takeover coming in, you'd imagine new players will want to come in droves. It doesn't work like that. It's just they have to be sold this project, and that's what it is. It's a brand new project from scratch, new background team, new manager. So there's a lot of hard selling probably going to have to go on. And if we're looking at guys like your guy Max Arns, who's Premiership player, granted he wasn't playing there last year, but he's at that quality, he's that level. Other Premiership teams, top end Championship teams, are probably going to be able to pay him exactly what he wants, and means he's not going to have to go far from home. Our selling point will be Europe, whatever level that may be. Fingers crossed it's Champions League, obviously, because that's what this new regime will want. That's what they're betting their chips on. That's where the quick money is. Instant Champions League access, because it's easy 40 million coming straight into your bank, plus gate receipts and other sponsorship things from that. So moving on then, I really enjoyed that. Ryan's a top man, and he really gets quite into it when you start asking the right questions. You see that he's very enthusiastic. Cheers, Scott. He's saying I've got a nice tan. That's a golf course, mate. We'll touch on then the Rangers statement that was released earlier this afternoon. Stevie, what did you think of it?
I thought it was quite strong, quite clear. They basically said pretty much what I think we wanted to hear. There's real inefficiency at the top of the Scottish game. The people who run the game, there's so much that can be fixed and improved. And I think they just want a bit of transparency and a level playing field. Even the statement the last time a couple of weeks ago when they said about, 4 of the 5 refereeing panel said, yeah, it was definitely a goal. I've got friends as a Hibs fan. He was at the game with his 2 sons. They're in the stand and he saw it was a goal. So my question to that is, who's this one that's saying it's not a goal? That's just unacceptable. Everybody saw that was a goal. I know Bomber got a lot of kind of flack in the press and stuff, but at the end of the day, he just said what we all thought. It's either inefficiency or it was cheating. It's one of the two. And I probably think it is just inefficiency, but it's not good enough. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, it's got to improve. It's been for that for so long, people just accept it. Whereas now I think because we've got a bit of financial muscle behind us, we're going to challenge these things, and hopefully, I'm not just talking about like improving for Rangers, for everybody. You know what I mean? There's terrible decisions every week in almost every game. So if at least an improvement, great. But that's ultimately the goal. Just have a level playing field, and for things like that not to happen again.
That's it. That's what you're saying. That's what we all want. We want a level playing field, and Rangers tried to push that, push that agenda a couple of years ago, and it met with a resounding no, even though they offered to pay for the whole thing. Like you say, there's one man seemed to dictate that day what was happening, and that's just not good enough. How can one man overrule two others? There's three of them in the room. You know what I mean? There should be a majority vote. That kind of way. I just think the technology's all there, and it's just not being used properly. We've seen that, and the rules are there as well, and they're not following the rules because clearly they don't know the rules. Because we've seen that in the cup final where we get diddled. I mean, I didn't know about that rule. I mean, that was a new rule for me, that the foul carrying on, it ends up a penalty or whatever. But I mean, it's another one of those honest mistakes that we just seem to be lying down and taking on the chin over and over again. And I think now these Americans, they don't play like that. You can see that across all their sports. When there's something wrong, they'll go to town, they lawyer up, and they go. And I think that's something we might see, as you've seen today. That was a strong initial statement on that, and I think we'll probably see more of that, because no doubt there'll be more garbage thrown our way as the season goes on next season.
Especially, quite quickly, what you said is spot on about the Americans. Like, you look at like the NFL, it's such a level playing field for everybody.
Yep.
It's almost like a socialist environment. It's mad. It's like, it's total opposite of what America normally is, but it's like, it's so fair. It's got to be fair. So they're going to want like kind of replicate that in Scotland, because ultimately that's what they're coming for. That's their background. So yeah, it's only going to lead to improvements as far as I can see.
Dale, your thoughts on the whole thing?
Well, initially I thought to myself, irrespective of the decision that they're going to make on Bomber calling it corruption, is they've actually got an opportunity here to be vocal about implementing the changes in the game, when the chief cheese of the referees has didn't back down, quadrupled down, didn't just double down, he quadrupled down, and like that's something that has to be addressed. It has to be addressed, because you can't have somebody in that position able to turn around and say that it's easy for Nick Walsh to be confused about it being a goal or not, when you could be sitting in the opposite stand and see the ball ripple in the net not once but twice. So therein lies a massive, massive question, a massive issue that we have within our game. That the chief cheese he's either corrupt or he's inefficient. So
we know he's inefficient. Come on.
I'll never forget Daniel Candace's red card anyway. So, but my point is like, so that's as high up as you can go. So that needs addressed. That needs eradicated. Like that mindset at the top of your game, because we're only going to further fall behind. And no wonder folk call it a farmers' league when you've got that ruling the referees, and Bomber Brown getting the fine. What was it, $3,000 or something? And like, fair enough, and like basically I'm implying that I can see why Bomber did it, because it's what every other fan was thinking and it's exactly what every other fan was thinking. And there's been outbursts by other fan media outlets and things like that of decisions in years gone by, but nobody that's ever been in that position. And we all wanted somebody in the media, like Rangers ambassador or whatever, to challenge these things like the other side of the site have had for years. They've had people in place for years. We've never had anybody actually with the balls to stand up and call stuff out. And it's actually crazy that one time we've had somebody do that, and the place erupted. And then the compliance officer comes out for hiding, all because big bad Rangers called it corrupt. Give me peace, man. You know what I mean? So, and see this compliance officer, they should be held to account as well, because they are I think most inconsistent compliance officer I've never heard the compliance officer when there's Rangers involved. You know what I mean? So that statement has set a precedent going forward that we will challenge everything, absolutely everything, and by doing that, the SFA, they've made a rod for their own back. Is it as simple as that? Sorry, I just needed to get that off my chest.
Good old rant. I think you're right. It's the fact he said what he said. Right, come across $3,000 fine. Yeah, years ago, your man and the Hibs TV said that Morelos should be chopped up and sent to the four corners of the globe, and they got away with a written warning. Like,
and also called us current buns. I know.
It's like, what's this? It's not high school. Written warning for your teacher. It's what it is. I do think status quo is there now, and I think that statement today is like, right, okay, we've seen that, we've witnessed that, we acknowledge that. We'll see how things play out going forward. So, like I say, I'm interested to see how things go. And I just think all we want as fans is just parity across the board. And I'm sure the other clubs now, especially with some of the decisions that happened at the end of last season, like Dundee, the penalty incident with the ball, it was a handball, but it was shouldn't have been a penalty. Things like that, just wee things like that. Surely our clubs now are like, right, we need to get on their case and demand better, because the last time there was scrutiny of the referees and it came to one side of the city, sure, they all went on strike. And when foreign referees refereeing our games, mind that was 10, 12 years ago, mind.
Yeah.
Aye.
And as you say, because they had people in the media that could spurn the narrative and spin the web, whatever you want to phrase it, and just constantly keep it in the press, the negativity or this, that, and the other. Whereas we've never had a cheerleader like that, because I just think we're better than that. Being honest, we just take it on the chin. But I think now it is that point now where we need to start standing up for ourselves. Stevie,
I read as well. Apparently, they over in the East End, they filmed a documentary to be filmed in the stadium about conspiracy theories against them. Do you know what I mean? It's like they've done that, and it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, you didn't want to get bogged down in it, but ultimately we want things to improve. You know what I mean? And that's the bottom line, because what's past is past. But they're asking goal. That's the kind of the most ridiculous thing I've seen. It was like, and then as Dino said about Wally Collum coming out and doubling down on it, it was like, come on, standards have got to be better than that. It was like, it really was like schoolboy stuff. It was like, come on, you're not on the playground. This is a professional game. Be better. Have better standards.
Yeah.
We've seen. Sorry, Dino. We've seen though, whenever a mistake's made, they get a slap in the wrist on YouTube, where your boy Clyde won, and then they're dropped down a division for a week, and then the next week they're back again. There's no incentive for if I make a full pas in one of the games, it's I'm all right. I'll do championship for a week or two. I'll be fine. I'll be back. Where's the culpability and where's the responsibility lie if you do make an error like that? Because look at the Premier League. The Premier League have went from a lot of quite high profile errors over the years, but you can see them trying to work on it. And when something like that happens, they do take the task. We don't do that in Scotland. Is it because we don't have enough? Is there not enough people coming through? You know what I mean? I think we get more info on it.
For me personally, I think it just boils down to the people that are running the game. They're not interested in making us better. They actually aren't. And I think it was, I can't remember what one of you it was. Sorry, but when we suggested to the league that we would pay for an independent investigation, and every single team bar maybe one came back and said no, all because it was Big Bad Rangers that was paying for it. If it was the other team in Glasgow, I'm sure they would all be there for approving it. So with this new regime at Ibrox and things like that, and having people in place with SFA and SPL, I think having those voices, you've got to think will probably stand us in good a chance as any for any change to actually happen. It's not going to be overnight. unfortunately, Willie Collum looks like he's still going to be in that position next year. So, and like you had said, how can like any job be taken seriously when you do make a mistake at work that's detrimental? Let's be honest, incredibly detrimental to the outcome of the job, and you're not reprimanded, you're not disciplined. Like, there should have been like, okay, you're disciplined, you've got, do that again, you're getting sacked. Or like publicly saying, like, and keeping all these things in house as well. It doesn't make the average fan have any belief that there's any improvement going on behind closed doors, because there clearly isn't.
We're not seeing it.
No,
I don't
not at all.
want to like castigate referees too much, because it's a really difficult gig. I mean, you don't want them getting abuse. Like, even at like younger like levels, refs get stick, and that's not on. You want them supported. But as somebody's pointed out there in the comments, it was RFC, I think it was 72. They're part time, although they're not full time. Ultimately, they need more funding, they need more support. But with weak leadership, like Willie Collum, what chance have they got? I mean, the SFA is like, they're almost worse than the previous Rangers board. You know what I mean? They're a shambles, ultimately.
I don't see your man giving up a chunk of his $400K a year salary to either pay for VAR installed across all the stadiums, which would have helped with.
That's insane.
Sorry to interrupt, but if he's £500,000 a year, he could pay four full-time referees $50,000 a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? I don't know how much full-time referees, but $50,000 a year, would that be right for a full-time referee? I don't know.
Reasonable. I'd do it.
Do you know what I mean? So, like, he's sitting getting £500,000 a year, and then gets.
That's disgusting, by the way. I never knew it was that much. That is absolutely disgusting. What does he do? $400,000 a year.
It's $400,000 a year he's on, and he's got a 2-year notice. So if they try to sack him, he gets 2 years' salary either up front or paid for 2 years. And I don't know if somebody can come in and fill the job while he's on that notice. I don't know, but he's laughing because he's got the whole thing tied up with a bow, like.
Yeah. Yeah, no wonder they don't want independent investigations.
Exactly. Here's a conspiracy theories coming. I think we'll call it there then. Stevie, thanks for coming on.
No, thanks, mate. That was great. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everybody for contributing.
Dino, thanks as well for coming on, mate.
Aye, pleasure and privilege as always. But thanks, good pod, lads. I've really enjoyed that.
Just before I go, I'll do a wee shout out to our sponsor, which is Off the Match I Go. If you see it's ticking along the bottom there, 10% off all products. Whenever you get to the checkout, just put in the Journal 10 code and you'll get 10% off any of your purchases there. And just up to me to say thanks for joining us. I really enjoyed that. And every night is a Rangers Journal night. See you.